are so excited to be presenting this. I'm Maria Gray. I'm one of the directors at the School of Professional Studies, the Masters of Sustainability Management, and Science degrees. And we're thrilled to have Claudia Dreifus and Carl Safina here with us tonight. And just a little bit of background, I'm going to give you on Claudia, if you don't know her. She's amazing, and then she will introduce Carl. After their talk, there will be some Q&A, some time for refreshments, and if you'd like to purchase a book and have Carl sign it, you can do that as well. So Claudia Dreifus contributes to the New York Times, the Quanta, MS Magazine, and CNN. For 20 years, she wrote and produced the Conversation With column in the Tuesday Science section of the New York Times. Here at Columbia, she teaches 2 classes in our program, writing about global science for the international media, and writing op-eds and small personal essays. Last spring, she won the Dean's Prize for Excellence in Teaching. We're not surprised. She also was an honorary member, is an honorary member of Sigma C, the Scientific Honorary Society, and is the winner of American Society of Journalists and Authors Lifetime Achievement Awards. Claudia, is also the author of 6 books, including Higher Education, which she wrote with her husband, the political scientist Andrew Hacker. And now on to the main show.
All right, the microphone. I feel a little like Tina Turner when I'm holding this. Thank you, Maria, and hello, friends and colleagues and students and neighbors. Thank you for coming out on what is the only nice day of the week that we're going to have. So I know this is a somewhat of sacrifice for you because the lure of a decent day is so enormous. And I think you're here because you want to hear from Carl Safina. You know, in the Masters of Sustainability Management program, we really care about science communication. And we care about showing our students how they can tell the story of their important work to the rest of the world. And tonight, in joining us in this open session of my class, to which you're welcome, we have one of the great science communicators of our time. He's the writer, the teacher, the ecologist, Carl Safina.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
What a warm greeting.
I don't feel like Tina Turner, and I'm trying to figure out what that would feel like.
Well, she was the master, the mistress of the microphone.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
she gave it meaning. Let me tell you a little about Carl. In 13 books, 13, for adults and children, many of them bestsellers, Dr. Safina has told gripping tales from nature. I'm sure you've read a lot of his books, or at least have come across them, and they've had an impact. Among them, Beyond Words, What Animals Think and Feel, and Becoming Wild, How Animal Cultures Raise Families, Create Beauty, and Achieve Peace. Because of these books, many people think of him as the worthy successor to E.O. Wilson and to David Attenborough, who is still with us. So tonight we're going to talk about his latest book, which has just been published this month. It's called Alfie and Me, What Owls Know and What Humans Believe. And this is what I'm littering already. This is what the book looks like. And we have copies available for you to purchase and for Carl to sign. And aside from this book being about Alfie, an orphan screech owl who Safina and his wife Patricia rescued and who became semi-tame. And that gave the Safinas a remarkable window in everyday owlishness. To this day, Alfie lives in the forest surrounding the Safina's Long Island home, and she's raised over the years 10 little owlets Go Alfie, way to go. We'll also be talking tonight about a different owl, the late Flaco, the Eurasian eagle owl who lived free in this town for almost a little more than a year. What did his life mean to the many New Yorkers who followed his every flap and his every hoot? Why, we're going to ask tonight, did we all care so much about him? Our schedule for this evening is that Dr. Safina and I will do a Q&A, a live interview, and then we'll throw questions out to you. Later, as I mentioned, Dr. Safina will be available to sign books. So now, let's talk about owls, elephants, dogs, and how to tell compelling stories about them.
Okay.
So, Carl, tell us, how did Alfie first come into your life? Do you want to?
Okay. Well, okay. If we're going to do, can we get the next slide? Who is slide advancing?
That's
Okay,
Alfie when he found.
So that was, thank you. So that was text I got on my phone. Do you know what kind of bird this is? And I thought, yes, a dead bird. And then I looked at it a little closer, and I realized, oh, that's an owl. And judging from the size, it has to be a screech owl. The person who texted me that had been called by someone who found this bird on his lawn. He got a list of wildlife rehabbers, one of whom was a friend who used to work with me and also was a pet sitter for us. And so I and the rehabber slash pet sitter put our heads together a little bit. She did an excellent job of getting Alfie stabilized and snatched from the jaws of death, almost literally, because not only was this bird in such bad shape, but also she had a bunch of fly eggs in that dirty matted down. And when those things hatch, you know what happens. So the maggots eat the thing that they've been laid on. It's horrible to even think about. But that's not what happened. This is what happened. And then if you can just do one more slide. That's exactly the right answer. You all got 100 on that quiz. So she thrived, and the idea was that as soon as she was able to fly and wander off at the normal pace, she would just go. We would not confine her. It would be what's called a soft release, which I had experience with because I used to be a wildlife rehabber. I used to be a falconer. I worked for the Peregrine Fund during the first reintroductions of peregrine falcons all the way back when I was in college. So that was the plan. And the plan didn't work because although she has all those feathers so beautifully there, her wing feathers did not come in for weeks and weeks. She couldn't fly when it was time for her to fly. So I kept her through, well, they eventually came in, but I was afraid they wouldn't fall out properly or molt in properly. So I kept her through a molt until she got her first set of adult feathers. One more slide. And she was perfect, perfect, perfect. So I don't know what your next question is, but I don't want to just keep on with the story because I get into the story.
So Alfie became like the semi-wild, semi-tame creature, and she wasn't afraid of you, which would be her instinct. How exactly, given this anomaly, did she provide a window into her world, and what was she able to teach you?
Okay, so by the time she looked like this, autumn was coming on, and at that point, we had been holding her. The idea was no cage, but we had been holding her because she couldn't fly. Flopping around the yard, she would have gotten one night of that. And we held her through the next spring because she probably would have starved to just suddenly be released as winter was closing and all the insects were disappearing in the cold. So one more slide. Then she did fly. We opened the door. She came and went for a couple of nights, and then she disappeared, which was my worst fear, that she would just bolt and disappear and be gone. But that was obviously a likely story. And then and we were leaving food out. She wasn't around. She wasn't taking the food. But a week later, she came back. I was actually away on a trip. My wife texted me saying, "Guess who's back?" And she came back, and she decided that she was going to center her territory around our house. So our backyard became her territory. Now, by all of this time, I had a long experience with her, and she knew exactly who we were. She recognized me and my wife. She recognized our 3 dogs. If somebody came with a strange dog, it freaked her out, and she was terrified. She was a relational being. So to answer your question, what I started to really see, even despite all the other experiences I had had with birds, which was a lot, that she was capable of understanding who she was by where she was and by who she was with, which is exactly how we understand who we are, relationally. And that's the life that she was capable of. Now, normally we don't see an owl, or if we see an owl, we get a fleeting glimpse, and it's a distant and remote kind of a presence. But because she knew exactly who we were, and Claudia is saying she wasn't really afraid of us, but she was thoroughly tame. So one more photo. Oh, that's the home crew. One more photo. She would just sometimes come and land near me, and with this photo, I just decided I was scratching her and she was enjoying it, and I just decided I'm going to, because owls preen, they preen each other, and I was preening her, and I thought, well, maybe it's her turn. So I just took my phone, I got ready for a selfie, I turned like this to give her, like to purse my lips, and that's what she did. So because she was that tame, I got to see her do everything completely uninhibited. And if you remember what she looked like when she first molted into her adult plumage, now you wouldn't expect an owl that looks like that to remain single for long. And she didn't. So one more. So she immediately attracted a wild suitor, and because she was thoroughly tame, I could just say right outside their nest, he took the cues from her. He was never tame, but he would tolerate my presence, and I got to see this whole life cycle and to realize how very much, well, I'm going to say it, very much like us they were. At first, she did not trust him. It was not an automatic thing. It wasn't, oh, the male does this and the female responds in this mechanistic way. She just didn't trust him. And then she kind of did. And then he would bring her gifts of food each evening, like moths usually in the early spring. She didn't accept all his gifts. Sometimes she did, sometimes she didn't, but then she did all the time. They started sitting together, they started roosting together, and what I saw was the development of a pair bond and recognition, not just an automatic stimulus response kind of thing, the way we're sort of taught that it is. It's not the way that we're taught that it is. Claudia.
Yeah. By the way, the photographs that we have here were taken by Carl's wife, who is a very brilliant wildlife photographer named Patricia Paladines. And I think when you're having an adventure like this at home, it helps to have a wildlife photographer in the household.
Yeah, yes, it does. And well, Yes.
Yes.
I did take some of those photos.
Yes.
Well, my wife is a much better photographer than I am, but I do have my secret to excellent photography is throw out all the bad ones.
So, since we're talking about photography, let me ask, is David Liu here? Because he did RSVP that he might be coming. Lei, yes, that's you?
Yes.
Well, the brilliant photographer who we all followed with Flaco, yes? Who would go out at night in Manhattan and find Flaco and then post these pictures the next day, and the whole city followed you. Thank you for coming tonight. We're going to ask you later a little bit about your experiences, if you don't mind.
I'm here with Jackie, my girlfriend, who is also a very talented photographer, who took many of the great well-known photos of Flaco.
Well, welcome, welcome. We're honored that you're here. Well, one of the things that I found interesting in your book, Carl, is that you refer to Alfie as your owl daughter. You know, most scientists would get their backs up at that. They would say, you're anthropomorphizing. I mean, think about poor Jane Goodall when she was doing her doctorate. She was condemned for giving her, the chimps she was studying, names. So now not only are you giving this owl a name, but you're making the owl a member of your human family. What's up with that?
Well, I'm a human, so I have a family. I'm a human with a family, but Alfie was not a human. Alfie was the owl part of my family. The dogs are the dog part of my family. And Alfie was, you know, I mean, I was her parent, and I think I did a pretty good job of parenting, considering that she has now been married twice and has raised 10 young ones and is getting ready to lay this year's clutch of eggs. You know, there's different ways to have a family, and I meant that, you know, somewhat facetiously, but also because what makes a family? A family is your sense of belonging and how you relate, and we had that, and she had that. So, you know, and as far as the anthropomorphizing thing, the basic principle of all of biology is that we are literally one organic family. And to make believe that we are not is to just perpetuate basically our favorite story, not us, because we're all nice people, but the favorite story of everybody out there, which is that only humans matter, humans are better than everything, and to not see and enjoy the differences and the similarities with other living things, but to insist that they have nothing to do, nothing to say, they don't experience anything. I was taught that other animals have no emotions, they have no experiences, they're capable of detection, not perception, and these things that are extremely unscientific because they have the vertebrate nervous system that we inherited. So knowing what we know about basic biology, we would expect that these creatures are what they are, rather than to continue to perpetuate this story that they are these empty machines. But that's a story, and it's not a science story. It's more of a religious story.
Yeah. On that, one of the things that Carl Safina does in this particular book is he intersperses his recounting of Alfie's story with various critiques of all the philosophers and scientists over the years, from Descartes to Darwin to Richard Dawkins, who have discounted that our connection to the animal world. Why did you do that way?
Yeah,
It was an
so-
interesting technique.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a really, if we're talking about this book, it's really an important thing to remember to talk about. So I had this connection with Alfie, and Alfie had this connection with us. And even with all the experiences I've had, having and training birds of prey, taking care of animals needing rehabilitation, raising homing pigeons when I was a kid, I was still amazed at the extent of her relatability and her recognition of individuals. And I thought, why are we're so disconnected from the living world? Why are we so disconnected from the living world? There's, I thought, two possibilities. One is it's a limitation of human intellect, or we're taught to be disconnected. So if we're taught to be disconnected, a way of looking into that would be, what were other people taught? And the book goes into what other cultures, what various cultures, including ours, have taught over the millennia around the world about the human place in the physical world, in nature, in the spiritual world, in the cosmos. What were the teachings? And I thought that it seemed, after I did a lot of reading on these subjects, and I was never interested in comparative religion or philosophy, but as soon as I started looking into this, it became instantly unbelievably fascinating, because what I immediately realized is that we are all bobbing around in a sea of ideas that are 3,000 years old. And we don't actually realize the extent to which we just live what we're taught about very, very old ideas. So there seem to be about for argument's sake, 4 cultural realms that sort of held together. One is indigenous land-based people, especially hunter-gatherer types. Cultures are extremely different. Their relationship with the land and their stories about their relationships with other living things, extremely similar. South Asian people, the Dharmic religions, the religions of reincarnation, one soul that travels through all these other life forms, the net of existence and relationality was another realm. The East Asian philosophies that are not exactly religions, Confucianism, things like that, the idea of the dynamic balances in which the seemingly disparate things in the world are necessary to create the unity of the world. So you can't have up unless you have down, or backwards without forwards. You can't have life without death. That's it's yin and yang thing, just to be a little simplistic about it. But that the diversity of the world creates the unity of the world. And then you have the West. The West is a total outlier. It's completely non-relational. Plato had this idea of this dualistic split between the physical world, which he did not like. It's a world full of calamity and suffering and decay, and his imagined perfect realm that was outside of space and time. He had his critics. Even his star pupil Aristotle thought that, like Plato would say that a brown dog was an example of perfect brown and perfect dogness. And Aristotle thought a brown dog was a brown dog. Aristotle also gave us the scala naturae, in which only humans mattered and everything else was here just for us to eat, basically, and use. And this dualistic split between perfection and reality, rather than the idea that the diversity makes the necessary whole, was swept up into the Abrahamic tradition and really amplified by the early Christian theologians. And that accounts for an awful lot about why we treat the world the way we treat the world, why we devalue the physical world, and why we have in the purely, just for the moment, just the purely environmental things that have to do with things like owls and habitats and the extinction crisis and the climate crisis and the toxics crisis, why we don't see those things societally and policy-wise as fundamentally important, or the situations we have as fundamentally bad and in need of fixing, is because of the values that we've been taught, that are 3,000-year-old Western values. They're not an automatic response of the human mind to the world or to the things that live on this planet with us. They're the teachings that we have. And this view has globalized, and partly in the form of the economic system and its values. I mean, you could value nature or owls one way, but we value them the way we do, which is mostly we don't. And I think that also the dualistic split, that wasn't just the material world, the spiritual world, perfection and reality, but it was also me against you, us against them, man against woman. It was not the best idea that humans have ever had, but I think that but seeing a split that is always me against you or us against them unleashed Europeans to be incredibly violent when they started to roam around the world. So anyway, it's a book about owls, and it's a book about all these other things that it's interwoven there to try to answer the question of why don't we relate to these relational beings? Why is it such a surprise? Why don't we know who we're here on this planet with? They've been here since before we got here. Why are we so estranged?
And that brings us to Flaco, who was this miracle in our midst for over a year. You had an op-ed in the New York Times shortly after he was found dead after crashing into a building not far from this neighborhood. And in it you said that from the moment Flaco was released from the Central Park Zoo by someone, he, quote, became a symbol of hope for many people who followed his story. What did you mean by that?
Well, let me just put a mild disclaimer here, is that in some sense, I feel like I'm not exactly authorized to represent Flaco in any way, mostly because I didn't really know him. But, you know, it's what I think universally reported that he was released.
Yeah, let me reframe the question then and ask, why do you think New Yorkers so identified with him?
I can talk about that a little bit. It occurs to me that he might not have been actually released. Somebody may have been trying to steal him and got an armful of talons and just went, and let him go. I don't know. But that occurred to me about a week after he died, and is neither here nor there really, except that he was out and he did not choose to go back to the zoo. You know, Alfie chose to come back to our house. He did not choose to go back to his house. That's a difference, and I think that matters. And he was obviously a tragic figure in the sense that he's a stranger in a strange land. He's the only free-living member of his entire species. He wasn't, you know, freaked out by the sounds and sights of the city, because that's what the sounds and sights that he was with his whole life. He got to see a lot more of it, obviously. But he was hooting up a storm all the time. And that is trying to find a companion who will never come, who isn't there. So to that extent, he was tragic. And I think we all relate to that. And I think that we really all relate to the idea of wanting to be free from our confinements We're all confined. We all make our choices. We're all free to a certain extent, and we're all stuck to a certain extent. We don't know where the best balance there is. We're always trying to figure that out. I'm trying to figure that out all the time myself, still. And I think that, you know, he became really a powerful metaphor in New York. An alien in New York, somebody who needed some help to get by, needed to get cut a few breaks, had faced an uncertain future. All of these things that were so relatable, that he was more. I guess the power, it came from the metaphor and from what people were projecting onto his predicament than it was a naturalist kind of thing. You know, nobody was purely observing him as a life form. We were rooting for him. We knew that he was up against all kinds of dangers, and that the chances of it ending poorly were high. How many of us just felt so great seeing a photograph of him on the sidewalk without people hurting him in such a vulnerable position there, but actually protecting him? I mean, that felt great to everyone. Don't you want to think that New Yorkers have that in us, right? And we freaking do. We did. It was right there. We wanted this guy to succeed. And then we had to calculate, not that we could do anything about it, because we couldn't. And that was another part of how fraught it was and how we were always on the edge of our seats. But we had to keep wondering, is freedom worth the risk? I had to wonder that with Alfie. And I was always worried about the prospect of releasing her. I was always worried about her prospects for surviving every step of that way. I worry about her right now with the Cooper's hawks that come through our yard. But Alfie in a cage, Flaco in a cage, that is really a dead end. And it's not at all being the creature that they were born to be. And don't we all want to figure out, what creature were we born to be? What is home for us? Home for him seemed to be freedom itself, because that's where he stayed. He didn't go back to the zoo. And I think that all of these thoughts were so manifest in the metaphor of his existence. And now we have to reckon and recalculate, what did we think it was really great that somebody let him out? Are we sorry that happened now? Do we think that it was great that he had his short, happy life of a year of freedom, but eating poisoned stuff all the time? That's pretty yucky, right? So there are all these countervailing, overlapping things. And that made his life really big in that way. It was so multidimensional for us. Maybe not for him. For him, it was probably, hey, I'm free, I like this better.
Well, from the human side, Carl, do you think the legend of Flaco reflected some kind of longing among New Yorkers, some hidden longing that we have for the natural world? If Flaco could survive in the city, then there was hope that we could find some kind of coexistence with the natural world. And you know, the pictures that David and Jackie took, where we would see Flaco on water towers and fire escapes, it just warmed the heart, because he was making an adjustment to the city, and the city was sort of bending to him, and he was finding a way. And it just made people feel good in some way, and made us all feel like something else was possible. David, would you like to, and Jackie, would you like to join this discussion? And maybe you can weigh in a little bit on what you think the meaning of Flaco's life was.
Do it.
Yeah.
You want us in the front?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't get up because I'm mic'd and
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
never-
wired too, but hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Yes,
you.
and
Very nice to meet you.
thank you both for what you did, which cheered the entire town.
Thank you. This was not planned. There you go.
Don't be reserved now.
Thank you. It's very kind of you. And thank everyone here for attending. We were ourselves curious about what Carl had to say, especially after reading his op-ed. I think I'd start by saying that our opportunities to watch Flaco, especially his transformation, you know, in the first 3 weeks from escaped zoo animal to really a wild card, were a gift, and we tried our best to, you know, share that gift with other people and honestly and accurately tell them about Flaco. You know, when he was first released, and Carl's right, we have no idea what the motivations of the person or people who did it were. They could have been trying to steal it. They could have had a grievance with the zoo and could care less what happened with Flaco. Maybe they had an agenda that they wanted a caged animal in a small enclosure to be free. We don't actually know. Nobody's ever taken credit for it, and we don't therefore know if it's something that we agree with. I don't agree at all with releasing zoo animals and just kind of seeing what happens. Because the outcome could have been very bad. And you know, initially he was alert, very alert, frightened. He was uncomfortable with you know, the new environment that he was thrust in. But then gradually he became more comfortable, relaxed. He started to develop his flight skills, and then amazingly one night, I was very fortunate to see him hunt for the first time, which was really a breakthrough for him. And you know, after that, it was impossible for the zoo to capture him. You know, they tried their best, but he just wasn't interested in their traps anymore. So, you know, it was a gift to see all that unfold, and then my opinion about it all changed over time as I could see that he would be able to take care of himself. And you know, I could not be more thankful for the opportunity to see all that and follow that journey and share it with other people.
And I'll just add that David and I recently returned from a trip to Madrid, which we were planning on going before Flaco died, but decided after his death that we wanted to go and see native Eurasian eagle owls in their natural environment and compare their behavior to Flaco's to get a better understanding of what he was doing on those water towers and why he was roosting in courtyards. Certainly we had our theories, but out of the 10 Eurasian eagle owls we observed and photographed in Madrid, most of them were living and roosting and nesting on human-made structures, churches and apartment buildings. And it showed to us how adaptable especially this species is to urban environments. And it really gave me a better appreciation for Flaco's adaptability. And I do believe, and this really resonated with me in your op-ed, that he chose to be free. And he didn't understand the risks, but he made that decision. I was there early on, a week after his escape, when one of his talons almost got caught in the trap that the zoo staff had set for him at the sheep meadow. I gasped. I was like, oh shit, what does this mean? And he flew off. And at that moment, I was full of mixed feelings. elation, I'll be honest. I was, happy for him, but at the same time, I was deeply concerned because he hadn't hunted for himself. He would prove to do it later that night, and David witnessed that. But there was a lot of concern, and so it was a gift. His life out of 13 months outside of the zoo was a gift for him, and I think it was a gift for us as well. Thanks for letting me share.
And thank you both for the photographs that the whole city was thrilled to see and learn so much from. I'd like to talk a little about dogs. I'm a dog person.
Okay.
And I know you have a pack of them.
Yes.
When we spoke for the New York Times a few years ago, I asked you about emotions in dogs. How many do you have, actually?
3.
And what else do you have in your household?
Right now we're
Yeah.
We're sort of at a low. We only have the 3 dogs, a couple of chickens. We had 5 chickens in December, but a fox came and ate 3 of them. And we have the owls in the yard. Before we get entirely off of Alfie,
Yeah.
can you just please advance the photos? I just want to go through a little bit. So that's the nest box. That's my wife looking for her first mate. I'm her mate, but she's looking for the first mate that Alfie had. Okay, next. That's him on the left. You will be taught in school that you cannot see any expressions in birds. You see what's on his mind. And Alfie is like, I'm just right between my 2 favorite things on the planet. Carl and my husband. All right, next. This is her first clutch. Next. To show you how small screech owls are, that's 3 newly hatched ones compared to the size of a mouse that their father caught and delivered. Okay, next. Next. So as they were growing fast, the dad became really a super predator. So he was catching sparrows at night, chipmunks at noon. If you would have told me, do they hunt in the day? No, they absolutely don't. But they do, when they want to. All right, next. Bringing moths to the nest. Next. Okay, dogs. This is the happiest of happy endings. A rewilded, yet completely tame little friend, creature, who has already raised 10 young ones and is ready to do it again. So, what was the question about dogs?
Well, the dogs can't upstage Alfie, really. But when we talked some years ago for the Times, we talked about dogs and emotions, and we talked about the whole question of, are dogs genuine in their love of people, or is it situational? Yeah.
Run back to the photo of my wife with the 3 dogs on the porch, please. Backwards. Yeah. I used to think that dogs were not interesting and artificial animals, that we just made whatever we wanted. We would make a fighting dog, a guarding dog, a dog that does nothing but sit in your lap, a dog that points at something you want to shoot, a dog that brings back something you've shot. I thought, these things are so far off of nature that I didn't really have any interest in them. And I mostly didn't really like being around dogs because a lot of people are terrible with their dogs, and I didn't like them being yanked all the time or being yelled at all the time. I didn't like dogs. And then 2 things happened. One is that your chair is over there if you want to get it. Go get your chair. I was writing my book Beyond Words, and I was in Yellowstone watching wolves every single day, and I suddenly realized, whoa, those are dogs. Dogs are wolves. Oh, here's what it is. It's that dogs are young wolves, and young wolves are constantly oriented to their parents. A pack is just a nuclear family. It has a mom and a dad, and then the young ones of 2 or 3 seasons. When they get to be about 3 years old, they leave to find their own stake in life, like we do. But dogs don't do that part of it. They continue to be oriented on their parent figures, which is their humans. So that was a kind of an amazing realization to me about the continued authenticity and ancientness of a lot of what it most fundamentally is to be a dog, any dog. And the other thing was that we, 14 years ago, there were raccoons denning in a tree at the edge of our yard, and the mother got hit by a car, and one of the emaciated little young ones fell out of the tree, and my wife and I raised that little raccoon. It's not recommended, but they're very fascinating animals. They're a little dangerous at times. They're very fascinating. And I would go out often in the evening, after the raccoon was stabilized and doing well, and was just coming in and out of our house and being around the backyard. And I'd go out and we'd wrestle. They're very, very, very playful. So that raccoon would do the play bow that dogs do, with the front legs down, hind up, and I thought, whoa, 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 whoa. That is really, really ancient behavior. That's not even a canid. So even before canids, the play bow is in the neurological behavioral repertoire there. And so it just made me update and expand my view of dogs. And then we happened to, around this time, we got a puppy, the first puppy I had since I was a child, a little boy. So really the first puppy I ever raised, and I totally fell in love with this little puppy. And I thought, this is the most fun, fascinating, fantastic kind of creature. And I'm a total dog lover now. And, is there apparent love genuine? Yes, it just obviously is, because all they want to get out of it is to be near the people, or sometimes the other dogs that they trust, to say, we're not here alone, we're here together. And we see this in my house every day, a couple of times a day, in some of the routines. For instance, we have never, ever had food in our bedroom or fed them in our bedroom, but they come up to the bedroom every night because that's where we all sleep. They were never trained to come to the bedroom. They're free to leave the bedroom. They just like being together. In the morning, if my wife gets up before me, our 2 bigger dogs, they can't actually climb the stairs anymore. They're 12 and 13 years old. So we're down to 1 dog in the bedroom with us every night. That dog will follow my wife downstairs in the morning if she gets up before me. That's the one on the right there. And a little while later, she'll come running back up to the bedroom. She'll start barking for me to get out of bed, because what am I doing up here when obviously we need to be together? And and all of the affection. It's not just that they want a treat, they want the affection because love feels really good to them. Love feels really good even to the owls. There was one year, So Alfie had a brood in 2020 and 2021. Her mate died, I guess. We didn't see him, but he didn't come back in 22. She cycled and laid eggs and sat on them for a week longer than would be normal, but they were not fertile. And I thought, I mean, it was incredibly sad for me because I thought, she's keeping the faith in a world that has broken its promise, and I was projecting all this kind of sadness onto her. But when it came time when she should have had young ones in the yard and should have had the mate coming back and forth with food and all of them feeding the young ones and the young ones following them around, because the young ones, after they fledge, they stay for about 3 weeks. And there was nobody. It was just Alfie in the yard in the springtime alone. I thought that was really sad, and I thought, maybe I'm just projecting. And then one morning, she just flew down to a low branch right next to me where I could just start scratching her. And just like a dog, she just closed her eyes and rolled right into my touch. Now, that's a nice story, but humans have not had a common ancestor with birds for 300 million years. But our nervous systems were already so fixed that we can still, across that distance in time, but not a big distance in terms of our capacity and our hormones and our emotions, not a big distance at all, we can still both find pleasure in that contact and that touch. Me and that little owl. And so, yeah, not just dogs, but these emotions and these bonds, they're very genuine and I think really profound in the story of life on Earth.
So let's throw this out, this discussion out to the audience and take it wider. This is a wider session of my regular class, and the students from this class are in the front, so they will ask the first questions, and then we'll throw the floor open to everyone else. Are there questions for Carl from the class?
We can start on the floor.
So
You have the floor.
Before you start, some ground rules. Everybody, say your name before you tell us what your role here at school or in the community is. And of course, well, everybody in class knows this, but make a real question, no speechifying, and stay on topic. Oh my God, I'm one of those people. Is that you or me?
That's you. Do something.
It's actually the director of the other program I teach it. In any case, did I answer that? I'll call her back.
Oops.
I'm really sorry. I hate when people do that. There's a whole Larry David episode about this. But then there's a Larry David episode about every small infraction in life. In any case, identify yourself, don't speechify, ask a question.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Mary
Good.
Austin.
It's just easier.
Really loud. I'm Mary Austin Carlson. I am a part-time sustainability management graduate student, and I am in the writing for international media for global sciences long title this semester. But my question for you is, you are speaking a lot around this narration of animals having feelings, and we can see those reflected in the behaviors. Can you elaborate more on the scientific research that builds on that theory? And are there feelings beyond like meta love, freedom? Can they feel things like anger, frustration, joy, and the range of human emotions that we experience day to day?
Okay. Yeah, so I think what I'm trying to do is simply just show that there's one family of life on the planet. That is the most scientific thing that biology has learned as a scientific discipline. It was intuited by everyone else in the world except the people who founded Western philosophy. But it was scientifically shown by biologists and especially, you know, I mean, Darwin was the first to recognize and write about and come up with a mechanism by which life on Earth has proliferated from a common origin. And I'm also showing, because I think it's fantastic and fascinating and lovely, that a lot of other animals have individuality. Where it's been, in any creature that it's been, in any species it's been studied, it's been found that different individuals differ. They have little quirks, little preferences. Some are shyer, some are bolder. These little things. And humans are animals. We, you know, some people hate that idea or are frightened by it. I happen to have always just loved the idea that I'm related to all these beautiful things in the world. I think it's just it's a great thing, and it's true. The second half of your question was?
Do they experience?
Do they experience? Yeah,
emotions that we do?
they experience a range of emotions, and it varies a lot depending. An animal is everything from a coral polyp to an elephant or a whale. Those are all animals, and the range of what they're capable of experiencing is not only wide, but it is different for different species. As some species, family groups are really a fundamental unit of their social organization, and some it's just not. So you have, you know, with those that are, like wolves and elephants and hyenas and hunting dogs and a lot, most cetaceans, probably all cetaceans, certainly all the dolphins and toothed whales
Parrots.
live in social groups. Parrots and some birds, where there's not just a herd, but a social group where they know who each other is, and they have bonds, and they have recognition and these kinds of things. I think they're capable of things like frustration. Some of them are capable of anger. Certainly, probably all of them are capable of, well, let's just say all vertebrates anyway, certainly capable of fear, and contagious fear is probably one of the most, maybe the most fundamental emotion among vertebrates. Anybody who has money in the stock market knows that very well. And but there are limits to that. There are the role of males in a social group varies. Chimpanzees, let's just say, for instance, they provide 0 parental care. Wolves have males that not only provide a lot of care and defense, they provide food, they adopt. If they find a pack, if a young male that is looking for a place in the landscape and in the social structure happens to find a pack that is missing its breeding male, he will adopt the pups that are there. It's very different from lions, where the new males kill the cubs when they find them. And my understanding is they always do that. Why that is, you can debate a lot. We were debating that at my house a lot the other night, actually. I think that I don't think I've ever known a bird or mammal other than a human that was worried about getting into grad school. I'm pretty sure that's true. So there are limits, there are differences. We are very, very remarkable animals. We have an extraordinarily strange range of lots and lots of different aspects. But I think that essentially everything you see in humans, you can see some flicker of, or some reflection of, or some precursor in some other creature. It's a matter of, it's much more, and maybe entirely more, a qualitative difference, not a quantum jump across a gap.
So let's throw questions out to the other side of the floor. Kate.
Thank you. I'm Kate. I am also a student in Claudia's class, I'm doing the MPA in Environmental Science and Policy. So when you were talking about Alfie, you mentioned that normally we don't see owls, and in New York City, we normally don't see much wildlife at all, especially if we aren't looking for it. And later on, you pointed out how disconnected we are from the living world. And I imagine those two things are very much connected. So given the profound role that wildlife has played in your life and your work in ecology,
How does one turn this off? Thank you.
So,
given the profound role that wildlife has played in your life and your work in ecology, what advice would you give to educators, parents, and just New Yorkers more broadly who are striving to cultivate a greater sense of connectedness to nature and the living world?
yeah. Well, I think I can't get up and move too far because I'm wired in here with I think that there is a very surprising amount of wildlife all around us. And a few years ago, a woman said to me, "We really want our kids to love nature, so this summer we're taking them to Botswana." And I said, "Do you have a bird feeder?" Because Botswana is far away, and it's not part of your life, and it's a place you went one time, and who knows what kids would make of that. But a bird feeder is something you can have fun with every day. See who's here at different seasons, see who comes and goes, see which ones are the tame ones, which ones are the bullies. So there's really a lot. It's not as much as it is, out in the countryside or the wilderness, but it's a lot more than you would suspect, I think. And I think it's, in many ways, I think it's enough to keep you going. There's also a lot more wildlife in the city now than when I was a kid.
Yep.
I don't think we had raccoons in the city.
Yeah.
I don't think we had hawks in the city. I don't think you could see skunks at the cloisters. There were no bald eagles. They were practically extinct. So it was me, my pigeons, going fishing with my father and my uncle out of Sheepshead Bay. It was the Bronx Zoo, the Museum of Natural History, where they had killed everything to put it on display. But those dioramas, for a little kid, those dioramas were universes, just incredible. The Coney Island Aquarium. So these things, I think, really, really matter a lot. People, you can get a cockatiel or something like that, and in a lot of ways, if you're a kid and you have a cockatiel, that means more to you than taking a trip to Botswana, I would think.
This lady, that gentleman.
Well, I was just going to make a statement, then I have a question. I wanted to say that on December 16th, at 9:53 p.m., Flaco landed on my balcony, and I was 2 feet away from him. I'm still not over it. I mean, just talking about it is just incredible. This is the other strange part about this. I actually had been writing about him I'm a writer, and I'd been writing about Flaco, so it was really weird.
You conjured.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a great picture of him that you'll be able to see after this. But one of the things that happened was at first I thought it was a cat sitting on my balcony, and then I realized it was Flaco. And his head swiveled, and he posed for me. And I kept telling my husband, this owl posed for me, and he's like, really? And then I realized that he was in captivity for 13 years, and of course he was probably used to posing. So my question, if anybody knows this, and I don't know if you know this, but what was his life like in captivity, in that little cage that was as big as a bus stop, they say?
I think, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I think his life in captivity was okay with him because it was the only life he knew. And if you don't know anything else, you don't know anything else. There are a lot of people that are like that. The life that they've always known is in some cases, the only life they can really imagine, and they're really, really amazed to see some people live very, very differently. He was probably quite comfortable, and maybe never thought about getting out or anything. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. I can tell you that a strange thing to me about Alfie was that when she was confined in the outdoor part of our chicken coop, she never tried to get out. She never was clinging to the wire or looking for a spot to get out. Other wild birds would do that. She never did that. And then when we did open the door, she eventually just sort of like explored her way to the doorway and then was coming and going for a few days before she suddenly vanished for about a week before she returned and has never left since then. So that's the best that I can conjecture about that.
Gentleman
Whoever.
back there and then the lady
Yeah.
in front of
Thank you.
him.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had a related question to that. I was just curious if you think it's okay that we keep, birds of prey in particular, or any kind of bird in a small confined area that they're not able to fly.
Yeah. Okay. Let me take a crack at answering that. So, no, I don't think that's okay. When I was a kid, the Bronx Zoo was a jail. It was like the county jail. And I think maybe before my time, they didn't even have animals that they thought would survive. They knew that they would die just from past experience. They just thought, well, we get a gorilla, the gorillas live for about 8 months or something like that. We'll put it on display until it dies and we'll go buy a new one from Treflich's pet store. I don't know if you anybody
I
here
got a
remembers.
parrot.
In Midtown, there was a place that sold gorillas, lions, chimps. I would go there with my father. One day we were approaching, the guy walked out with a lion on a leash. I mean, believe me, things were different. We in some way that is hard to really imagine, we really have come a long way. So the big cats at the Bronx Zoo, they were in a jail with a concrete floor and a pile of hay on a little platform. That was a lion enclosure. The last time I went to the Bronx Zoo, a tiger was stalking a duck that had landed in her pond, and she was stalking through the high grass. So a lot more of her tigerness was expressible in that situation without it being at all dangerous for her or anybody threatening her or another one trying to come kill her to take the territory or anything like that. So I think that there are some trade-offs in captivity, and I think that there are some zoos that are good zoos that basically try to work for the animals, and they do conservation work. They keep endangered species going through the way that they're breeding these populations. They do some good things. The best zoos work for the animals, and the worst zoos make the animals work for them. the idea, you know, aviaries that you could walk through. There was no, birds were just in cages. That was that. So I don't think it's okay to have a bird in a cage that's too small for it to fly. But I don't think it's necessarily terrible for a bird or many other animals to live in captivity. I think captivity never scales to cetaceans. And I think that very few places can keep elephants with the social situation and the room that would be okay for them. But I have seen what I think is okay elephants in captivity. I have seen psychotic elephants in captivity too.
Gentleman back there, you've been very patient.
Hi, my name is Nigel Warburton. I'm a philosopher and journalist. Just in passing, I think it's not fair to say that, I mean, I found your talk very interesting, but I don't think it's fair to say that philosophers have been universally opposed to considering animals. But I think in recent years, but following from one from Jeremy Benford, there have been people interesting, Peter Godfrey Smith, Martinus,
No, I didn't mean to say universally at all. I just, you know, Plato and that school, I would say, from what I know of philosophy, even in ancient Greece, Plato had his critics, and there are philosophers all over the map on these kinds of things. So I wouldn't say, you know, blanket.
No, but that's just because I think the question is nothing to do with that. It's not philosophical. It's about semi-domestication. We know that for many birds, semi-domestication is incredibly dangerous. And I know that your aim with Yam was to release it. You talked about self-release. And it was a kind of photomere solution not to do that. But isn't there a risk that many people be envious of your affectionate relationship, you know, beautiful relationship with that animal, and might actually go out of their way to try and domesticate animals which are quite happy in the wild?
Yeah. So, just a minor technical point is that domestication is when a living lineage, animals or plants, because they're domesticated plants, but they're bred to be different than the wild type. So you're talking more like a semi-captivity or a tame wild animal situation. And for many of those, well, people are doing so much worse to animals all the time than anybody who might ever get an owl and raise it. So I think, you know, that the chances of me being a bad example are pretty small, but I get your point. I think your point is good. If it was one of many mammals, a tame animal wandering up to somebody who's afraid of it is likely to just get killed. So yes, that's bad. If it's a larger bird of prey that's raised by humans, then especially when they're, well, I was going to say especially when they're young, but maybe all the time for the rest of their lives, they can be dangerous because they will territorially attack strange humans. They'll attack them. That's one reason why they changed a few years ago, I guess a while ago, they changed the falconry regulations so that you cannot go get a red-tailed hawk out of a nest and raise it for falconry. You used to be able to do that, but they're a species that attacks people if they've been raised by people. They won't attack you. They'll attack somebody that they see as an interloper in their territory, or maybe even a threat to you in some. So they can be dangerous. Great horned owls can be dangerous. The book One Man's Owl by Bernd Heinrich tells of him raising a great horned owl who would attack people. If you get attacked by a great horned owl, that can really be trouble. Alfie is so small that it's essentially impossible for her to actually hurt anybody. And I believe that none of my neighbors have ever even seen any of our owls, with the exception of the people who live 2 doors down. That guy who I've known for about 35 years, I consider him to be the best naturalist on Long Island. His name is John Turner. He has seen them. Nobody else has even ever seen them. So in my case, I don't think that that's a risk. As far as people wanting to get owls, good luck trying to find one. I mean, I'm all set up to take them in, and this is, like a once in a lifetime thing even for me. So.
Let me be a bit of a timekeeper here. We've got very little time left and a lot of questions. So at this point, I'd like people to kind of play Jeopardy round.
Okay, lightning round.
Lightning round in Jeopardy. One of the students in the class, and then that gentleman, that lady, and an ex-student.
Hi, I'm Leah Cantor. I'm another student in Claudia's class. And I was wondering, you've written that the devaluation of nature sort of seeped through the scientific revolution and industrialization and into our modern economy. And I've thought a lot about that in the past of how former religious ideas of the earth being not the real world, of being disposable, seems to have translated into us disposing the world. And so my question is, from your perspective, having studied these things, how do we revalue the world in a way that can get us back to where we need to be in relation to it?
Well, it's obviously, actually doing that is not easy at all, and maybe not even possible at this point. I don't know. But it just takes teaching a kid one way or another. That's all it takes. So, if you raise your kids to delight in nature, not be afraid of it, see it as part of your living family and the miracle of life on earth and coexistence, that's what they'll have. Period. Open and shut, case closed. And if you teach them other things, that's what they'll have. Period. Okay, next question.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Gary Conger. I'm with the sustainability program at Penn State. So thinking about how we can affect biodiversity crisis here at home, and here in states and cities, what policies are out there you see with shifting markets and shifting behavior on a state and global level?
I don't think I have a good answer to that question of what policies would shift. Well, I mean, we have environmental laws. Those are policies that created a gigantic shift. Right. Basically, when I was an adolescent and in high school and in college, all those laws that came online, those were policies that created a gigantic shift. And despite the tremendous difficulties in enforcement and the tremendous weaknesses within the Endangered Species Act, nonetheless,
No.
Quick follow-up to my question.
I would say, despite that, we're one of the few countries, that has that stuff, and that's a big change. Valuations, I'm not sure. That's not really kind of my field. So.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we're going to have to move quickly to get to everyone. The lady in red.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jai Zucchini. I'm a master's student in climate and society, and I do research at the laboratory. I have a question about how to best sort of apply what you've learned to animals that are structurally incredibly different from us, like because I personally work with invertebrates, and it seems very hard to kind of bridge that gap, even though they are incredibly vital to how we live, how to best sort of relate.
Yeah. What invertebrates are you talking about?
I work with dinoflagellates and foraminifera.
Okay. All right, well, needless to say, those are a little bit far from us. I don't know what they perceive, but I will say something that I think is really mind-blowing. You have a bacterial cell, It's one cell. And it finds food by following a diffusion gradient, where the food is over here, so the diffusion around it is more concentrated than it is over there. The bacterium somehow not only has to detect and behave, it has to have a clock that tells it that the concentration is greater now than it was 1 moment ago, so it should keep going in that direction. That's an incredible amount of stuff for one cell to be able to do. So I think the interesting part of that is if you ask how far sort of back in evolutionary time down the simplicity ladder do you have to go before a living thing senses nothing at all? I don't know the answer, but it's far down. That's what I would say. Okay, next question.
Good evening. I'm Sanaya. I'm in the Sustainability Management Program, and I'm a student in Claudia's class. My question is, how can we distinguish between what an animal might actually be feeling and expressing versus what we might be projecting or like doing an anthropomorphism of? For example, you mentioned you felt sad when Alfie's partner didn't come back, but is it possible that Alfie didn't care at all? Like, are we just thinking she's sad because we might be sad if our partner?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when Alfie's mate did not come back, she called and called and called and called and called and called. She was looking for him, or at least somebody. And there is also a woman, I can't believe I just lost her name. She's written about grief in Non-Humans. And how would you tell that they're grieving? And she has a good functional sort of filter. If they've lost an individual that they knew and they behave differently than their routine. So they stop eating as much, or they break their travel routine, or they wander around, they wander way off somewhere, and a lot of animals do things exactly like that. We've seen that even with our, we had some ducks one time, and a fox killed the male, and the female just spent days and days and days quacking and quacking and wandering all over the yard into the next yard. She was obviously looking for him. So you can observe these things and then just say, what is the only answer that makes any sense about what's going on? It doesn't tell you exactly how they feel. But you can also go to a funeral and not know exactly how they feel. You know, some people are like, they will never get over the loss of their parent, and other people the next week they're sort of back to it because they are more practical, or they didn't like their parents so much, or their capacity for love has been damaged in childhood or something. You just don't know what people do either. But we put labels on these things. We say, oh, humans are capable of love. What in the world does that word mean? I love my mother, I love ice cream, I love brown shoes. Love? I love that movie. I love my child. It's the same word. It's not the same thing at all. We're just very sloppy in our thinking and our application of these labels, I think.
On that note, I think it may be a good food for thought, something, what we in journalism call a kicker. You provided us with something to think about. I hope that everyone here continues the conversation, either in your schoolwork or in your life, or with the animals that surround us and that we know and sometimes love. We have refreshments for all of you and books for Carl to sign. And I thank you for coming out on a beautiful night.
Yeah, thanks for braving such nice weather to be here.
Carl Safina for coming from Long Island and sharing your ideas with us.
It's been my great honor and pleasure. This has been a lot of fun for me. Thank you.